palatial studios at Emerson College in beautiful downtown Boston. This is the Jeff Santos Show on Revolution Radio Network. Rebuilding America. Together. Investing, activism, and supporting the middle class. Now, here's Jeff.
Thank you, Shane, and good afternoon, Americans, and welcome to the Jeff Santos Show. We are live in Studio A on the campus of Emerson College. It is great to be with you on this gorgeous day today. It's somewhat gorgeous. 23rd of February, 2016. It's not freezing. Tomorrow is going to be a disaster. Rain, snow, so it's perfect in terms of that. You have to compare and contrast. We got a great show with our good friend Mark Taylor-Canfield about all things Washington State. The great independent journalist from Puget Sound in Seattle. We'll talk Nevada politics and the aftermath of that fiasco in Las Vegas. We'll also get his thoughts on Microsoft playing rival with Apple and asking for the government to have the right to go in and get Apple computers. People protesting in support of Apple today. We'll talk about that with Mark. Later on in the broadcast, we'll talk to our good friend Mark Kilfoyle at 4 o'clock, and State Senator Bill Perkins of New York will join us. I've been trying to get him on last month or so. He's endorsed Senator Bernie Sanders as an African-American senator from the great area of Harlem, not far from our good friend Herb Boyd. And we'll talk about a big endorsement by Mr. Spike Lee today of Bernie Sanders as well. It's interesting. Mentioned yesterday Malcolm X and Do the Right Thing, and boom, came out today. Somebody's listening to me, I guess. He got a great phone number to join us, 772-925-8206, 772-925-8206. You can email me, Jeff at revolutionboston.com. Check us out on Facebook and Twitter at Jeff Santos Show. The 5 o'clock hour will give us Lawrence Korb. We'll talk about the closing of Guantanamo Bay, Gitmo. And, of course, Marco Polo Rubio and all the Republicans don't want to have it happen because they're going to all be loose. And, of course, the president, who has nothing to lose because he is a lame duck, is like, he even said it, I don't run for office, neither is Biden, even though I think Biden wanted to. So that's the story. And what I think we have here right now is a opportunity, to talk, but we got to do the right thing, and keeping him in Gitmo is not the right thing. All right, and wrap it up with Robert Craig of Citizen Action, and we'll talk all about Wisconsin. They're trying to get some progressive radio there too. Lots to talk about. Again, phone number to join us, 772-925-8206. For those of you who are Sanders supporters, this Spike Lee endorsement comes at a great time. Obviously, a lot of discussion in the mainstream media, which, of course, has already decided that this race is over and done with, and for Hillary. Just think about this for a second. This so-called powerhouse barely gets by an unknown, quote-unquote, socialist senator from Vermont by a point in Iowa. Loses by 22 points in a place that she won 8 years ago against the current president. And she squeaks out a victory in Nevada thanks to the help of Harry Reid, who put his fist down and said, you got to vote for Hillary on Thursday night for the Saturday caucuses. And all of a sudden, she is this runaway. The Clinton media operation is very...
Investing, activism, rebuilding America together. This is the Jeff Santos.
Welcome back. It is the Jeff Santos Show, 34 minutes past the hour. Taking your calls at 772-925-8206. It's time as we go every time at 3:34 Eastern Time. We go west to the great city of Seattle, where you find a great independent journalist. You can check him out on Twitter, check him out on Daily Kos, and check him out right here every Tuesday at 3:30 Eastern, 12:30 Pacific. Our good friend Mark Taylor Taylor-Canfield joins us on the phone.
Hi, Jeff. Yes, I'm living it up in sunny Seattle. We've actually had a pretty warm February for Seattle. So, yes, and just posted some Bernie Sanders cartoons at Daily Kos, kind of talking about the Bernie Sanders phenomena. So, big topic in Seattle right now.
Well, we were talking yesterday, and I want to get into the Nevada situation with our good friend John Nichols. And we were talking about the fact that these caucuses are the most corrupt thing going, and we need to do away with them. Now, the fact is that Bernie can do well in a few of them, but that's beside the point. He also obviously did very well in the only primary we've had thus far on the Democratic side, beating Hillary Clinton by 22 points. So I think he can do well in a primary. The question is that, when you have incompetent people running the thing, when you're deciding it by a flip of a coin or a flip of a card, as in the case of Nevada, we have a scenario here where, this to me is unprofessional. It's a corrupting process. And I hope that Washington State maybe takes the lead here, gets rid of their caucus altogether, and go only with the primary. What do you think about that in Washington State? Is that at all going to be discussed?
Well, Washington State has one of the most complex caucus/primary systems in the country, so it's already a complicated process. And we had this discussion during our national press briefing last week at Democracy Watch News about, does the Washington State caucus primary process allow for manipulation? And after thinking about it for a while, what I came up with was this, is that according to the Secretary of State's office in Washington, the parties can decide how they want to weigh the vote. They can either choose the delegates according to the caucus result, weigh the results in the favor of Hillary Clinton. The Democrats can decide to do that. Say the caucus with a big percentage for Bernie Sanders over Hillary Clinton, but they're pretty even, or she even wins the primary. Well, the Democratic Party has the right under Washington State law to choose which results to use in
oh my God,
choosing delegates for the nomination. So it is open to some manipulation.
It's unbelievable. So basically, now, is there any other state in the country that has both a primary and a caucus? I don't know of any other one. They usually have one or the other.
Right. Sometimes there's a sort of combination, but Washington State seems to be the one state that decided to do the dual system. And if I remember right, the logic there was we had the traditional caucus system in Washington State, and there were folks saying, hey, a primary would be a better idea. We would probably get more attention from the country with a primary than a caucus. And also, they started messing with the dates. So the Republican caucus and the Democratic caucus are at different times, and also the primary isn't until May. So there's a big, long process, and it's very complicated and hard for the average voter to understand. But I think what that move was to get a higher profile media image here in Washington State, and that's why they decided to go more for the primary. But at this point, it's a combination, and it's a very complex system. And you really do have to go in depth on the Secretary of State in the favor of the candidate we would rather support. And unfortunately, it is open to that kind of manipulation.
We're talking with our good friend Mark Taylor-Canfield here on the Jeff Santos Show. Phone number to join us, 772-925-8206. Again, 772-925-8206. Nevada was, to me, a fiasco. But as you say, Bernie Sanders was 50 points down, lost by 4 or 5 points. And the delegates, matter of 3 or 4, one with 19 to 14, whatever it was. So, 19 to 15, I guess. it just seems to me that what we are seeing, and you and I face this every day, is a Washington-based media, for the most part, some in New York, that are trying to wrap this up. Front pages of the paper that all the news that's fit to print, the New York Times, right up there, above the fold, as our friend Chris Matthews would say. Lead story yesterday, very steep hill for Sanders to climb. They're using outrageous cronyism 101 in the process of the Democratic Party. I don't know what you're hearing, but to me, between the caucus systems, between the mainstream media saying this is over when the popular vote is in Bernie's side, and the delegates are barely tied, is to me outrageous. This is our profession, and I'm embarrassed by it, to tell you the truth, and how they are covering this race, particularly the networks and the New York Times. Your thoughts?
Well, the New York Times is questioning the Hispanic/Latino votes, so that they're questioning that directly. As far as being on the West Coast, you're absolutely right. It feels isolated from the major media market. We're talking mostly East Coast and Chicago, and and Los Angeles as well. But I think the West Coast has its own view of what's going on. The real story here is that Bernie Sanders has surprised everyone, and as I was mentioning to you, I spent some time in the Southwest, quote, Democratic Socialist candidate, or even a very progressive candidate like Bernie Sanders got as much support as he did in Nevada, because when I spent my time there, when my grandfather was a jockey and also owned racehorses down there, it was very much a cowboy sort of Republican, libertarian sort of place to be. And so I'm really shocked. But then in the last few years, I've traveled in Nevada and also other parts of the Southwest and in the southwestern part of Washington State, and I've noticed a new influx of younger voters, quite a few more Democrats than there used to be. So some of the demographics we have our own issues with bias in Seattle with the Seattle Times, owned by traditional Republican Frank Bluffin. Although he did endorse Barack Obama for president. So sometimes, it's not the complete editorial. I'm just seeing the typical media bias. The reality is that Bernie Sanders is not very happy even with the Microsoft applications that were being used in Iowa. So he's questioning a corporate sort of spin on the election results, wanting to be.
We're going to come back, talk more with our good friend Mark Taylor-Canfield. It's the Jeff Santos Show, back in a flash.
Rebuilding America together. This is the Jeff Santos Show.
It's the Jeff Santos Show. Live from Emerson College, talking with our good friend Mark Taylor-Canfield. We got a good friend, Marla Kilfoyle, coming up at 6 minutes past the hour. Mark, talk to me a little bit about what Microsoft is doing to Apple. I see with this whole issue of trying to get the individual from San Bernardino who murdered 14 people. The United States government is trying to fulfill a situation where they're trying to find the code, and once you enter the code on an iPhone, you have it about 20 times, and if you don't get the right code, it just automatically dissolves. So they're trying to get into the back of the computer, so-called backdoor, and Apple, to their credit, doesn't want to do this because it sets a precedent. Now Microsoft, Mr. Gates comes out, of course, friend of the Obamas and others. He's, they got to find a way.
I've heard a lot of negative comments in Seattle about the Gates statement from privacy experts, and the news today is actually the fact that retired U.S. Air Force 4-star General Michael Hayden, who is the only person, he talked to Yahoo News and said that he agrees that Apple should not provide a backdoor and that building in backdoors universally in Apple or other devices actually is bad for America. I think we can all agree it's bad for American privacy. We're arguing it's bad for American security in terms of what adversaries will be able to do against the U.S. citizens. So what it is you've got, a major head of the two major security and the intelligence agencies in the United States former head saying he agrees with Apple. So I think that is going to put a dent in the Microsoft argument when you have a former head of these agencies saying that it's been something that in the past Apple has actually had a little bit more privacy, a little bit more encryption. And it's an issue for the consumer, too. I mean, if it comes down to it and people feel that Apple or Microsoft doesn't, because privacy issues in the United States have been very, very controversial for many years. And
talking with Mark Taylor-Canfield here on the Jeff Santos Show. I'm just so frustrated by the fact that we still spend so much time. We have the Gitmo issue today, and we'll be talking with Lawrence Korb a little bit later. The right wing and even some in the Democratic Party, want to make a big deal out of this. Even saw Senator Bennett today, another corporate Democrat, brought to you by the Clinton and Harry Reid wing of the Democratic Party. Didn't want to go along with what President Obama is saying in terms of bringing these folks into the United States that were at Gitmo. The idea is horrific, of course, that 14 people died in San Bernardino, and, of course, obviously what happened in Paris. But we shouldn't be changing ways in which the government of the United States can go in willy-nilly and go after everybody. There's got to be other ways to protect the country, besides having to use these backdoor techniques. And, to me, it can be done. Hayden is saying it. I think that there's a good sign here for those who are concerned.
Well, there was a major town hall meeting in Seattle a few months ago about these kinds of issues, and it was called Reigning in the Surveillance Society. And there's a former telecom, very good on this issue. Chris Hagopian is somebody that I would highly recommend as far as looking into these issues, because he is an insider, and he said right up front during his Seattle town hall meeting that the telecom industries that he worked for were originally built on the idea of collecting data from people, that it actually that it's the nature of telecom companies to data mine. And so, of course, law enforcement and intelligence agencies are going to want act, and really has been pushing encryption, because at the same time that he's criticizing them, I think they also appreciate the fact that he's mentioning their products. So,
yourself a great one, and check him out on Twitter, Dilly Coast, and a number of other places. All the best, Mark. Have yourself a great week. Still on the Republican side, Marco Polo, he's going to come back. He's going to do all this. He hasn't even won a state. Bernie and Hillary are closing ties. Now, look, I understand South Carolina's coming up ahead. Doesn't look good for Bernie. And some of the southern states look like a problem for him as well. But he should do well in Massachusetts. He should do well in Colorado, Minnesota, Oklahoma even. Obviously he'll do very well in Vermont. And then he moves on to what I think are the most pivotal, and I've been saying this for a while now, day of elections. Ohio, Florida, Illinois, and North Carolina. Missouri is in there, too. That's the decisive day. And Bernie has to win his fair share of delegates, maybe win a state or two, and hopefully have some momentum going into the spring, where you have Wisconsin, his native New York, of course, where Hillary is from, representing, and all the way, of course, to California in June. So, in my view, he has to hold his own on Super Tuesday, get a little closer to Senator Clinton, Secretary Clinton, come South Carolina on Saturday. And if that is the case, make more and more inroads in the African-American community. I think Spike Lee will be one of those individuals, of course, with our good friend Nina Turner and Ben Jealous and others, who, in my view, will be key to introducing the senator into some of these communities of color. Again, he's a new senator to them. He's been around, but he doesn't have the access in Vermont, the entire white delegation. There's only 3 of them to begin with. Even in New England, there's not many African Americans. In fact, there's only been, I think, 1 African American member of Congress and 1 senator, Ed Brooke, and this guy Franks in Connecticut, representing New Haven. I can't think of it. I may be wrong. If you know differently in New England, give me a call at 772-925-8206. But the way I look at this, folks, is that this is a place that the senator from Vermont has to make more and more inroads. And if he does that, I think that as we get along toward a different part of the black community, a more Midwestern, northern African-American community, then you will see, I think, the issue of trade, which Bernie Sanders does very well in, which creates, job loss, and the issues, of course, what's been happening in Chicago recently with the whole case of police brutality. What we have seen, obviously, in New York with the Gardner case, his daughter has endorsed Senator Sanders' campaign. So it's a whole different story as you get away from the South. Look, I'm a Yankee. I'm a Northeasterner. I've lived in the West Coast. I've lived in the Northeast. I guess the closest I've lived to the South, if you want to call it that, is Washington, D.C. And there's a different philosophy, both black and white, as you head further south. And Hillary Clinton, even though she grew up in Illinois, her husband is a son of the South. So there's an automatic advantage there. South Carolina, Alabama, the deep southern states. So she should do very well there. That is her home territory. Now, of course, the Clintons move around a lot. They can consider Illinois, where she grew up. She can consider Pennsylvania, I think, where she was born. And, of course, she's now in New York. So you have a number of home states there, which, that's fine. Hey, that's the way the Clintons go. But I really believe that the political philosophy of voters in the Midwest, black, white, brown, Asian, and in the Northeast have a better situation for Senator Sanders. And eventually in California, where maybe we have the most progressive state in the country. In terms of also population, you could say Vermont, Oregon, we're also in that territory. But this one is the big kahuna. That's the largest state. So, that's how I look at this going forward. A lot of other analysts will take a look and say, well, he has to do this, he has to do that. And, of course, a lot of pundits for the national networks, they have, an agenda. And the agenda is the corporate candidates. It was first Bush and Clinton always. And of course, they're going to want to have Marco Rubio in there. But eventually, they're going to turn around, the Republicans will, and adapt and adopt Donald Trump as one of their own. He's in the same financial category, after all, that all of their donors are there. So they should feel pretty comfortable. I think the real question here is, will we start hearing policy questions as we move away from the South? There's a debate in Michigan, I believe, is the next one. Well, that's where the TPP issue. That's where issues that Senator Sanders should be more comfortable on, the economic issues should be there. Now, Secretary Clinton will bring up the Flint thing as a racial issue. But the situation with Flint, in my opinion, and we're going to talk to Mr. Guyette again over the coming days, the ACLU reporter who broke the story, is that there was malfeasance. There were people on both sides of the aisle, on the Republican and the Democratic side of the aisle, including Jennifer Granholm, who is a big advocate and surrogate for Secretary Clinton. she was the one that started, having these oversights, these emergency managers in Detroit and so forth. So this is when it started. It didn't end with her, and she was better at it than what the Republicans are doing, but she had it. And again, we always talk about the EPA. Where were they? Obama EPA folks. So, this is why, and I think a lot of Americans feel this way. They look at it and they say, we need new leadership. That's what's driving Donald Trump. That is what's driving Bernie Sanders. And when you get in caucuses, and like Iowa and Nevada, the incumbent candidate, or the candidate who has powerful